Well, sometimes I think, certainly when we're talking from the Bible, the most obvious things still need stating. The most obvious things often are the most useful, encouraging, and challenging. And we say, well, they go without saying, but they don't entirely. And so an obvious point is that being a Christian is about loving Jesus. So all the good things that we could say, all the good things that we could do, they must be from an overflow of our love for Jesus. How do we show our love for Jesus? And part of that answer is an uncomfortable truth that we put our money where our mouth is. So whether we like it or not, our money shows us where our heart is. Other things do as well. If you've seen the film Love Actually, it's quite cheesy. It's not my typical sort of film, caveat up front, but it has its moments. And I can't remember the names of the characters, but there's a character played by Alan Rickman, and he's married to someone played by Emma Thompson. And she finds, they come back from something together, and she goes through his pocket, or she's hanging up, she feels something in his pockets, and it is in his coat pocket, a very expensive necklace, and she assumes it's for her for Christmas. In fact, she gets a CD. She's looking forward, it's around the right size packet, and it's a CD. The necklace was for his secretary, who'd been flirting with him. She's much younger, and she's playing to his ego. Now, when he's found out, he's very repentant. Not sure anything else particularly happened, but the point is clear. His money spent was where his heart was at the time. He spent his money on where his heart was at the time. He could say that he loved his wife. The secretary meant nothing, but his credit card said otherwise. Love for Jesus is not shown to him by just saying it. It's not shown through religiosity, as I reminded us at the start, but in costly, often public, extravagant display that fears nothing of what others think of us. C.S. Lewis said, love needs to be, Love needs to be expressed to be completed. I'll say again, it's got it wrong twice. Love needs to be expressed to be completed. He went on to say, love transcends duty. It goes beyond duty. Duty has its place. It's not a bad thing, but duty only carries so much weight. So this is a call to love Jesus Christ, and to love him fully, it must be expressed appropriately. And that's just what Mark 14, 1-11 is about. These are the last moments as Jesus goes to the cross. And here's another one of those sandwiches that Mark likes. So verses 1-2 and verses 10-11, the bread. In the bread, people want Jesus dead. So verse 1, it says they want to kill him, but verse 2, not during the feast, it may cause a riot. Verses 10-11, Judas betrays Jesus and brings the plan forward. We'll come back to this briefly towards the end. But Jesus dies when Jesus wants to. Again, we see God's sovereignty over, Jesus' sovereignty over the whole situation. And the filling is in verses 3-9, a woman anointing Jesus. So Mark sets up for us this contrast of the bread and the filling between the religious authorities and Judas and this woman. So the religious establishment, even one of the 12, who should know better, oppose him, compared to this unnamed woman. The authorities in Judas, they use all the right language. They look down on this woman, but it's this woman who shows us, we didn't even get her name, shows us true devotion. In fact, through the chapter, there's lots of contrast like that. So our love for Jesus should be a natural response for his love to us. And that's shown, his love to us is shown as this chapter and the next chapter goes on in his death in our place. This woman's love shames us, and yet in some ways you could say that we can have a more informed love than she did. So two things we can see from her love for Jesus. The first thing is her and the opposition she experiences, and we'll notice some of these contrasts that Mark makes. So two things are, verses 3 to 6, extravagant love is not a waste. And verses 7 to 9, love gives what it can while it can. So firstly, verses 3 to 6, extravagant love is not wasted. So verse 3, we see her action, and verses 4 to 6, we see two responses to it. So her action is in verse 3. It's a very simple act. She breaks an alabaster jar of perfume, it's pure nard, and she pours it on Jesus. And it's very expensive. People in the reading, they say this could have been sold for 300 denarii. Denarii is a year's wages. So we're talking about 300 days. Towards a year's wages is the value of this. So this is, I suppose, our equivalent to those people who have who collect wines or whiskies, and they cost thousands of pounds a bottle. And you think, do you drink that? You don't open that, do you? Or maybe they do. These things are sometimes family heirlooms. So sometimes in Jesus' time, ordinary people did have such items that someone had perhaps handed down to them. Maybe you've got something like this, something that's valuable, it's been handed down, don't really want to sell it. But maybe it's there as a pension provision or something if you needed it. So she gives this to Jesus completely in one go. And it provokes two reactions. So verses 4 to 5, some of them there say, what a waste of money. All that valuable perfume just gone in a flash. It could have been spent on the poor. Her extravagant act has achieved nothing. Now, Matthew's version of the same account, this only includes the disciples are saying this as well. That the poor are still poor. Jesus still goes to the cross. There has nothing has been changed by her actions. I remember I was in sixth form at the time, the news of Tiananmen Square and that man who stood in front of a tank and stopped it. You know, what a grand gesture, something stuck in our minds. But a couple of days later, there was a massacre. His grand gesture led to nothing, no bearing on history. This woman, she's helped nobody. But Jesus' reaction is quite different. In verse 6, Jesus said, leave her alone. Why do you trouble her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. So he's not concerned about what this action has achieved. He is concerned with where this action came from. Far from condemning her, he commends her. She has done a beautiful thing. Her action is motivated by love. And love like that is extravagant. Why do we buy flowers? Very grateful for this. This is a tip into this. It is nice to break up things, doesn't it? You give flowers to someone, and you could say, here are some flowers I've just killed. It's my duty. Be true. But it's different, isn't it? It's saying, why do you do something like that? There's a certain extravagance about it, about how it imposes, it sort of suggests some kind of affection or gratitude or whatever the reason is you're giving the flowers. The language of love and the balance sheet are different, aren't they? Now, we need to be wise about our personal finances and church finances. We need to balance the books, but it is not wise to do that at the expense of expense. The mark of a true Christian is love for Jesus. Two comments from J.C. Ryle about love for Jesus. First one, without love for Jesus, nobody will see heaven. One thing everyone in heaven has in common is love for Jesus. If you don't love him in your mind, heart, soul, you will not be in heaven. Second comment, a cold heart has a slow hand. A cold heart has a slow hand. If your heart is not full of love to Jesus, you will be slow to live out a response. Duty only carries so much weight. Duty informs us of the right things to do, it reminds us and holds something up to us, but it needs to be driven by love. Slow to give time, we will be slow to give time and money to pray and do other duties, whatever it is we feel we should do, we will do slowly if we're not filled with love for Jesus. True love for Jesus will be shown in extravagance. And when it does, it is never a waste. So the challenge is for love to be completed, it must be expressed. And I know for a lot of us in the room, not for all of us, but for a lot of us, that is a very un-English thing to say. It's very un-English to show enthusiasm. You're allowed to be good at things if you're English, as long as you didn't try. Being a Christian, I suggest, might be a very un-English thing. It is a countercultural thing. Well, actually, wherever you're from, it's countercultural, just different ways. It's countercultural to show extravagant love for Jesus. I don't mean showy, but not sincere. But love to be completed must be expressed. And that's what church is about why we sing, why we take the Lord's Supper, and so on. It's not really true to say you don't need to go to church to be a Christian. Love to be completed must be expressed, and we do so together. And notice, extravagant love does not fear looking silly. You can imagine sitting at the table and this woman comes in and what is she doing here? And then she does this act. And the smell. Now, some of you wear aftershave or perfume, I imagine, because I have virtually no sense of smell. So it's wasted on me. But you know how people sort of puff and then walk through to get the right amount on. This is a whole alabaster jar of perfume. Imagine the pong, pleasant pong, but the strength of it would be overwhelming smell, would have filled the house. But weeks afterwards, people would walk into Simon's house and go, "What's that smell?" Well, it's a very interesting incident that happened. It's extravagant. She doesn't care what other people think. We don't care what other people think with extravagant love. Extravagant love doesn't intentionally draw attention to itself, but it's focused on the object of our love. So that's the first thing that we see, is extravagant love for Jesus is never wasted. Second thing, verses 7 to 9, love gives what it can, while it can. Now, some things in life you only get one shot at, and when the moment is gone, you've missed it forever. Some of you were here when a friend of mine, Tony Ford, came down and spoke at a men's breakfast and an evening service, and he was a professional footballer. He talks about these, he used to play as right back, one time as a centre forward. He scored a goal when he's being marked by none other than Franz Beckenbauer. He had one shot and he took it, it went well for him. Most of us, if you only get one chance like that, most of us don't get some chance like that. And this woman has a chance that none of us will have. She had one opportunity and she took it. A one-off, unrepeatable event in history. And you and I cannot do as she did. And the good news is we don't need to either. But the point that Jesus makes in verse 7, in responding to the criticism, is that poor will always be with us. Now, he is not bodily always with us. The poor are always with us. Jesus physically is not. Clearly, Jesus is not anti-poor. This can't be an anti-poor statement. Jesus has said enough about the poor that we need to always show our concern for them. But the point he's making is bodily, he was only here for a short time. So we cannot do as she did. Jesus is not here in physical form. That makes what she did not just a unique event, but unique significance too. Because her motivation is purely love, but her actions speak louder than her intentions, as is often the case in the Gospels, without realizing it at first. As Jesus says, she's anointed his body for burial. All bodies would have been anointed for burial after death. All except criminals, especially those executed on a cross. Of course, Jesus dies a criminal death on a cross, so no one would have the opportunity to anoint his body after he's dead. And so here, his body is anointed before he's dead. So yet another sign of God's sovereignty and control over these events. So she took a chance, this one-off event. However, we still can show extravagant love to Jesus, and we mustn't miss the chance when it comes. Her motive is simply love, and her aim is, in a public way and a costly way, to show her love for Jesus. And our motive and aim is the same, but we have a different privilege. Our day is the day for preaching the gospel. In verse 9, we're told this woman's story will be told in her honour. Because of this event, every time the gospel is proclaimed, at some point, this story is going to be told. And here we are in 2026, still speaking about her because of her act of devotion. The day of proclaiming the gospel calls for the same motive: extravagance and costly love. For us, we aren't to spend money on perfume, but extravagant money to spend on making Jesus known. This woman showed her love of Jesus to others, and we can do that too. We can spend our time, money, and efforts to that end. Missions here or elsewhere, or things that support that end in some way. Church finances needs to be prioritised along this motive: extravagant love for Jesus, a desire to go public with that love. And there's another cost that can come to us: cost of embarrassment and criticism. And the same is true on a personal level. You look at our time and our money. Now, some of us have got things like smartwatches and phones, and they often show us where we spend our time and our money. That shows you where your heart is. It shows you what you love. Think for a moment that you're on a date with someone. Imagine stopping yourself mid-date and thinking, this could have been spent on poor. Of course we wouldn't. Or if you do, it's the wrong person that you're going on a date with. The language of love and the balance sheet are always in tension. If you're spending money on a husband or wife or a son or a daughter, it's not a waste. It's an investment, even if we can't see what it brings. And we need to do it in part for us, not them, to express our love to them. Obviously, you do it to people they love, aim to do that. Notice verse 8, she did what she could. She sacrificed this costly perfume that she had. Now, for others, that'd be easily affordable. They might have had a shelf of them at home. Not such a big deal. But she had no more to give, and so there's no more that could be asked. She did what she could. There's a similar sort of sandwich on the other side of chapter 13 of a widow giving her 2 pennies. She gave what she could. And we all have different things at our disposal. We can give what we can. But it's not just about money or what we do, is it? Jesus sees the motive in her heart. We can do the right thing because we know it's the right thing. That might impress one another, but it doesn't impress Jesus. It's interesting, isn't it, how Judas takes affront to this, and he's denial is also over money. If we just do the right things purely out of duty, it brings about resentment. So actions have to flow from the heart, but they should flow. And sometimes I think our emotions are, it's a bit like having a dam. The actions won't flow downstream if the love isn't there to release what's above. They should flow from love. So the challenge then is not how much do we give or what do we do, but has Christ captivated our hearts? The way we fight sin isn't just stop it. It's part of it. But love of Christ, that he captivates our hearts. The way to love Jesus Christ then more is to get more of him. Now, I mentioned at the start, verses 3 to 9 is the filling, and verses 1 to 2 and 10 to 11 is the bread. The bread is the intention to kill Jesus. Verses 1 to 2 and Judas' betrayal, verses 10 to 11. What a contrast to this woman. And verse 10, sorry if I've said something like this before, but verse 10, I find the most chilling verses in the Bible. And the phrase is repeated in verse 43, repeated in the other Gospels, and that is this phrase, Judas, one of the 12. Of all the people, one of the 12. In fact, verse 43, he betrays him with a kiss and calls him Rabbi. He shows respect and friendship. He takes the moral high ground over this woman. But what about the poor? And yet clearly he has no love. The disciples question her actions, and yet later we find them asleep in Gethsemane. And despite his protestations that he will never ever betray Jesus, Peter denies him 3 times. And then there's Judas, one of the 12. It's a sobering reminder, isn't it, when you stack them all together, that our position and our service is not a substitute for love. A cold heart has a slow hand. Also, when we do the right thing, but not from love, that's where resentment comes from. We're not told loads about Judas, but don't you think every time we read Judas, you think, here is a resentful man? God does not need our help. God does not need our money. He does not need our time. So why are these things repeatedly asked of us? Because we need to do them. For love to be completed, it has to be expressed. That means, on the one hand, we've never finished. We can never give enough because we can't repay God for what he's done. But we're not to be driven by guilt and duty. Love isn't driven by guilt and duty. Duty merely informs where the love should be going. That all we do should be an overflow of our heart. Now remember, we're in the second half of Mark's Gospel. This is the half where Jesus shows his love for us at the cross. And this is what this whole build-up is showing. And what we've been seeing as well is that our love in following looks like taking up our cross to do so. So our love for Jesus does not originate in us, but in him who first showed his love for us in dying for us. And that's going to be demonstrated in a moment when we come to the Lord's table. Love, to be sincere, has to be expressed. A Christian, by definition, is someone who loves Jesus Christ. Let's pray together.